quickly as possible. This will give me great relief. As soon as the conveyance has been signed, you may begin the building work immediately. I'm coming to India soon, at least by October, and I want to see that the building projects in Bombay, Mayapur, and Vrindavan are going on nicely. This Bombay project is one of our most important projects in the whole world, and I am looking to you and the others there in Bombay to see that it is done very magnificently. Prabhupada repeatedly instructed the managers in Bombay not to deviate from the terms of the purchase agreement. The devotees should press Mr. N to the original agreement. Prabhupada was worried that he had not heard from his lawyer, Mr. D, 2 weeks before. He had telegrammed both Mr. N and Mr. D asking for reports on the delays, but he had received no replies from either of them. He had since written to another lawyer, a friend in Bombay, asking about the delay, and in Los Angeles he received the reply Mr. D was no longer his attorney. A couple of days after receiving this shocking news, Prabhupada received a formal letter from the office of Mr. D informing him of the same. Of all the recent news from Bombay, this was the most disturbing. Prabhupada began to see how Mr. N had been devising a devious plot from the beginning, that it was not just a matter of slowness or bureaucratic delay. Mr. D had been in league with Mr. N. They were cheaters. Now it was going to be a real fight. ISKCON would have to go to court and file criminal charges against Mr. N. There was no avoiding the fight, but Prabhupada still felt that his position was legally very strong. Before leaving Los Angeles, he thought of a further tactic. He wrote to Giriraj that he should put a notice in the newspaper advising the public that ISKCON had signed an agreement for purchasing Mr. N's land at Juhu. Although Prabhupada had appointed GBC secretaries to oversee the Krishna conscious movement in various parts of the world, he was the real GBC secretary of India. Wherever he travelled, therefore, he remained partial to those projects. He was setting the perfect example of a GBC secretary. While conscientiously attending to practical affairs, he remained always transcendental, fully dependent on Krishna, and always preaching. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19, text 171. Start from 171. So I'll just go through these verses myself, and if they're on the board, you can follow them. Actually, we can do this one line at a time. Madguna Shruti Matrena Mai Sarva Guhashaye Manogatira Vichina Yata Ganga Basombudo. Just as the celestial waters of the Ganges flow unobstructed into the ocean, so when my devotees simply hear of me, their minds come to me. I reside in the hearts of all. Srila Prabhupada's purport. This verse and the following 3 verses are quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam 3:29, 11 to 14. They were spoken by Lord Krishna in the form of Kapila Dev. Lakshanam Bhakti Yogasya Nirgush Nasya Hudaritam Aitukhyavya Vahitaya Bhakti Purushotame. These are the characteristics of transcendental loving service to Purushottam, the Supreme Person of Godhead. It is causeless and it cannot be obstructed in any way. Salokya Shashti Samipya Sarupyai Katvam Apyuta Diyamanam Nagrinanti Vinamat Sevanam Jana. My devotees do not accept Salokya Shashti Sarupya, Samipya, or oneness with me, even if I offer these liberations in preference to serving me. Text 174. So Eva Bhakti Yoga Kya Atyantika Udarita Yena Tivrajya Trigunam Madbhava Yopapadyate. Bhakti Yoga, as described above, is the ultimate goal of life. By rendering by rendering devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one transcends the modes of material nature and attains the spiritual position on the platform of direct devotional service. Bhukti Mukti Adi Vanchayadi Manihaya Sadhana Karile Prema Utpana Nahaya. If one is infected with the desire for material enjoyment or material liberation, he cannot rise to the platform of pure loving service unto the Lord. Even though he may superficially render devotional service according to the routine regulative principles. Srila Prabhupada's purport, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur mentions that if one maintains within his heart the desire to enjoy the results of good work or being embarrassed by the material world, the desire to get out of material entanglement, one will never be able to attain the transcendental mellows of devotional service. In other words, one must not desire material profit when rendering devotional service. Even if one follows all the 64 regulative principles, he cannot attain pure devotional service with a contaminated heart. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshunmilitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Kam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Grimna Kripatamam Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So a few verses here. Just as the celestial waters of the Ganges flow unobstructed into the ocean, so when my devotees simply hear of me, their minds come to me. I reside in the hearts of all. So here, this verse and the following 3 verses, quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by Krishna in the form of Kapila Dev. So these various verses, these are the transcendental characteristics of transcendental loving service to Purushottam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is causeless and it cannot be obstructed in any way. My devotees do not accept Salokya, Shastri, Surupya, Samipya, or oneness with me, even if I offer these liberations in preference to serving me. And Bhakti Yoga, as described above, is the ultimate goal of life. By rendering devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one transcends the modes of material nature and attains the spiritual position on the platform of direct devotional service. If one is infected with a desire for material enjoyment or material liberation, he cannot rise to the platform of pure loving service unto the Lord, even though he may superficially render devotional service according to the routine regulative principles. So some very nice food for devotional thought here. So interesting that the analogy is given celestial waters of the Ganges, not just as a river flows into an ocean. It's seen celestial. So the celestial waters of the Ganges cannot be contaminated. That's mentioned in Nectar of Instruction, that to someone with faulty vision, they may see so many contaminations on the Ganges. They may see bubbles, foam, and mud, and they might think, well, I'm not taking a bath in there. I'll come out dirtier than I went in. Or they see some dead body or something floating in the Ganges. So, but the thing is, the waters of the Ganges are considered always pure. Just like prasadam is pure, it cannot be contaminated. And just like the Lord's holy name is pure. So the soul is also pure, but temporarily we become covered. And we identify with that covering, and then that becomes our Atma, that becomes our self. But when we start to identify with the other Atma, the actual eternal self, then that becomes a self. I remember one devotee giving a class a long time ago. He says that sometimes we may be attracted to doing certain things which are not the type of thing that a devotee should do, and we can tell ourselves, oh, I don't do that any longer, I'm a devotee now, or at least we're aspiring. So that can that kind of mentality, as we think of ourselves as a devotee, that I'm representing Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada, my spiritual master, this movement. So, for example, sometimes devotees think that it's good to be renounced from vanity, and that's a good thing, but not that we should show up with like 3 days' growth, or devotees look like it's just been pulled out of the food waste bin or something. Try to make yourself look somewhat tidy, representing devotees, representing Krishna consciousness, so that the people will see. I heard Shiva Ramaraj he's given a class once in Hungary, and devotee asked, should we have tilak on or not tilak on in Sankirtan? He says either. He says, but don't have this like half tilak on where it's all crumbling. It just looks like a mess. You should be either nice and tidy or not at all. So, and then same with should we wear devotee clothes or should we wear non-devotee? He says whatever you're wearing, make it smart. It should be a smart representation. So for ourselves, we might not really care. We may not take care of ourselves so much, but it's not for ourselves, because when we surrender to Krishna and the spiritual master, then we're saying to the spiritual master, use me as an instrument. Simply one of your angas, one of your limbs. So if we say we're one of the angas, but then the limb does something else, the limb's supposed to be like feeding, but decides, no, I'm not going to feed. I'm just eating the prasadam myself. I'm not putting it into the mouth. The mouth gets everything. When do I ever get to taste anything? So I'm just going to have this feast all on my own. And Guru Maharaj can get his own feast. Krishna is self-sufficient anyway. He doesn't need me. That's true. But we need Krishna. And in order for this situation to be that, just as the Ganges, celestial Ganges, flows into the sea automatically, so when the whole natural system is there, when the sun is up, evaporates the water, takes it in the clouds move along, they rest on the peaks of the mountains, then the rain comes, and sometimes the rain runs down, according to the season, it runs down the mountains into the river beds and then comes back into the ocean. Or if it's cold, then it will sit as snow and then it will just gradually come out throughout the year. What a wonderful natural arrangement. And these natural arrangements are there by the mercy of the Lord for the living entity's sustenance. And when we work in harmony with the Lord, then these things become regular. But when we don't, when we want to just enjoy separate from the Lord and we make our own plans and exclude the Lord, then material nature becomes disrupted. The order of things becomes disrupted. So although many people have the inspiration to try to do something to save the planet, if they don't include Krishna, because it's his planet, if they don't include Krishna in the plan, and they're simply going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul. This is what's going to happen. We see that already. For example, okay, there should be no more fossil fuel cars, but they're going to take some other limited resource and exploit so many people. This is going on in Africa just now. Children are being exploited, working in the mines, so that we can get so much cobalt to make batteries. And so that in more affluent countries, we can walk around, drive around, feeling that we're saving the planet. It's not necessarily going to do that, People aren't looking a little bit further down the road. And the fact of the matter is, if Krishna is seen as the Bhoktaram, Jagatapasam, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, Suridam, Sarvabhutanam, the well-wishing friend of everyone, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and the well-wishing friend, the Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, the Lord of all material and spiritual worlds. So when people see that, then they can rethink their whole lifestyle. And then people can become more cooperative with each other. When we're not Krishna conscious, then we don't cooperate. We put our own ideas first, we put our own goals first, and we think that nobody's got a better idea than me. And or we just put ourselves first, where we don't really care for anyone else, and we just, as long as I'm okay, then it doesn't matter what the rest of the state of the world is like. So typically, if you go anywhere between 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock in the morning, or maybe even 7 and 9, and you stand at the side of any motorway, you see traffic going this way and that way, thousands of cars. So people that live here are going to work there. People that live there are going to work here. And they're just passing each other, chucking all this pollution at the atmosphere. And if they were just to stop and think, well, perhaps we could discuss this so that we can actually not even need a car. So rather than, well, okay, now we'll have electric cars, but where's that coming from? Where's the energy for that coming from? It's coming from another resource of the Lord. But the devotees, so they'll never be satisfied, because we're always making some arrangement. That the more we try to conquer over material energy, the more we become entangled in her complexities. This is given in the purport to the Maha Mantra way back in 66. Prabhupada gave this talk. So Prabhupada was already seeing this is the nature. So the details which we're experiencing just now in 2023, these are just the details. But this is the principle, is that when we try to lord over the material nature, we become entangled in the complexities of material nature. We become blind to cause and effect, and we think that we can cure. So here, this is mentioned in one of the verses, that the devotees do not accept Salokya, Sharti, Surupya, Samipya, or oneness with me, even if I offer these liberations in preference to serve me. So 2 verses on, Shilbhakstanta Saraswati talks about these 2 things, which is basically bhukti and mukti. So would anyone tell me what is bhukti? So you're trying to enjoy the material world, and or trying to enjoy the fruits of our actions, and mukti is liberation. So he says that those, if one maintains within their heart the desire to enjoy the result of good work, or being embarrassed by the material world, the desire to get out of material entanglement, one will never be able to attain the transcendental mellows of devotional service. So the transcendental mellows of devotional service is that which is going to satisfy us beyond whatever we can conceive of. The Lord is beyond our conception. He's Adhokshaja. He's Aparushya. He's beyond the range of our mind and senses. So our tiny little conception of this world will remain such as long as we desire to enjoy the fruits of our actions, or that we simply desire to get out of material entanglement, which is another desire, which is called action and inaction. That one wants to simply negate activity in order to seek the highest relief, which is impersonal liberation. So of these different types of liberation, can anyone name what that's called? Sayuja, yeah. And here it's also called Ikatvam. Is it Ikatvam? Yeah, Ekatvam. Eka means one, Tvam means with me, so oneness with me. So there's, I think actually there's they're not all mentioned here. Salokya, Sharsti, Sarupya, Samipya, or Sayuja, but there's one missing, isn't there? There's 6 types of liberation. Anyone spot the one which is missing here? So Salokya means, as in the word suggests, loka, to live on the same planet as the Lord. Shasti having the same opulence, Samipya having direct association, Sarupya as in Rupa having the same form. You kept one is with me. And there's another one. Does anyone remember it? That's your homework for the next time. So, as devotees, sometimes, even still, we're in the material world and we're suffering. And typically, Srila Prabhupada says that an intelligent person doesn't like to suffer. Nobody likes to suffer, but when Srila Prabhupada says an intelligent person doesn't like to suffer, then the real intelligence is to figure out how to get out of this suffering once and for all, not just like, okay, I've figured out how to get rid of my headache, I know what tablets to take, or I've figured out how to get out of this misery, I'll just take to some kind of mental adjustment, some intellectual adjustment, I'll just practice positive thinking or mindfulness. Now, these things are okay, using Krishna's service, but if you use it just like, there's types of persons who don't surrender to Krishna. One's called the Naradama. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, and why are they described as being the lowest of mankind? Do you remember? Prabhupada mentions in the purport. Because they have everything, they have all social systems, so much material arrangements are there, very well organized, but it's without Krishna. So they're taking everything from Krishna, but giving no recognition to Krishna. So just like the subterranean heavenly planets, it's considered that the enjoyment there is even greater than the heavenly planets. So people would maybe consider, well, why is it not termed as a heavenly planet? And that's because it's devoid of Krishna consciousness. So material enjoyment is a goal. And the senses are the center of activity. So just previous verse here was Rishikesh. Rishikenem, is it? Sarva Padi Vinir Tat Parat Vina Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha, Seven back to Ruchite. Bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of all the senses. When the Spirit Soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. So this is from the Narada Pancharatra. So the difference between Narad and Narad, not to be confused. Narada means topmost human being. Narad means lowest, where the accent of the A is. There's a difference. So we don't call him Narad Muni. It's Narada Muni. So Sanskrit is such a subtle language. There used to be that in the days of the Treta Yuga, when they had done for the Yuga Dharma, they would do very opulent fire sacrifices. And if someone mispronounced one word or even one vowel, then they would stop it and start again, because you may get the opposite result. Of course, in Kali Yuga, it's not required to become Sanskrit experts. Otherwise, we're doomed if we just get one vowel wrong. We shouldn't worry about that. But we should try our best to be attentive to these things. Particularly, we're chanting these various prayers every day. The Guru Vastak, Guru Vandana, etc. And we should learn them. We're going to be singing them the rest of our life. I remember having that realization back in '84. At least I was planning to spend the rest of my days as a devotee. Hopefully that will continue. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be chanting this the rest of my life, I should actually learn how to pronounce it properly, learn what it means. So every day on the car to Sankirtan, I'd just be reading the songbook and scrutinizingly studying the pronunciation and the word for word, so that it actually develops some meaning. So this is putting some effort into the foundations of our Krishna consciousness. Interesting that in the early days of Krishna consciousness movement, devotees didn't have songbooks, so they didn't. A lot of the devotees pronounced the words wrong, and some of the words were actually not even anything like the sound. But some of these devotees had so much devotion that they could have just sung la la la, and it would have been acceptable by the Lord, because this is the intention. But we shouldn't be lazy in the name of the good intention. And we should, especially the Maha Mantra, at least that one we can pronounce properly or do our best. Just get the whole mantra in and keep on trying to bring the focus into this. But so when we're singing these songs and reciting these prayers, it's important that we learn what they mean, because they are full of meaning. Sometimes the Krishna conscious movement has been accused of meaningless repetition due to chanting Hare Krishna mantra. That might be true in some cases, but it's actually not true in the proper execution of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Shri Kuntai Mapishashi Ki Jai. So our chanting shouldn't be meaningless repetition. It may get like that if we're simply not paying attention to the Maha Mantra. It may get like that if we're not paying attention to our service. We're thinking it's just some kind of mundane work. We relegate what is a great opportunity to perform devotion service for the Supreme Lord and the Supreme Lord's mission here on earth at this point in time in Kali Yuga. We relegate it to just some kind of mundane work. Then that's what it becomes to for us. Just like if one sees the deity simply as stone or wood, the Prabhupada says then we have a stone heart and a wooden head. But if we have faith in the process and then we accept that this is the situation, then we see the transcendental nature of all the things which we're involved in. So because it's natural for the Ganges to flow into the ocean, then it's also natural for the living entity to perform devotional service. And what is unnatural is the obstructions which we have accepted. So this devotional service, when one finally makes that bhakti yoga, that connection, then these symptoms, lakshanam bhakti yogasya, the symptoms of characteristics of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, they cannot be obstructed. So this is called unmotivated and uninterrupted. So when we begin, obviously, we don't start from day one as a pure devotee, unless you're here as a Shaktivesh avatar, empowered incarnation of the Lord to bless us all. But generally, we, and even those who are empowered, they don't consider themselves like that. You know, if someone tries to espouse their own glories that they're liberated, then I think that would be quite questionable. Liberated soul doesn't consider themselves to be liberated like that. They certainly don't profess it like that. If we take Srila Prabhupada example, then he would consider himself full number one. And he genuinely considered that. And the other acharyas, they also consider themselves to be fallen. So this is the example that they're setting to us. That it's not that we just consider ourselves fallen until one day then realize, oh no, I'm not fallen any longer, I'm amazing. Now the soul is amazing, that's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. But the mood is that we think everyone else is a better devotee. Everyone else is a devotee but me, I'm just struggling here. I'm not a good devotee. I'm just by the mercy of the devotees I'm around. And because of that, then we're enthusiastic in devotional service. It's not that we are despondent because of that. So to begin with, we are motivated, and it does get interrupted. It's interrupted by our desires, by laziness, and by other kind of Kali Yuga traits, misguided. Sometimes we listen to some misguided philosophy and we get distracted. That's more dangerous than simply falling into the senses. Falling into the senses can be a weakness, but if we fall into some misguided philosophy, it can become a big distraction, and it can strangle the Bhakti-lata beach. So therefore, we should be careful to what we read and what we listen to, and we should take inspiration where we find it, which is enhancing our enthusiasm to perform devotional service, enhancing our enthusiasm to associate with devotees, and to develop the right mood of devotional service. And because there's 4 types of persons who approach Krishna, can anyone name any 1 or 4? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's some motivation there. And in Kali Yuga, mostly it requires us to become distressed before we start looking for something, because we're so short-sighted that simply we're looking for some kind of instant gratification. In Kali Yuga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are not so popular. People don't necessarily want to be dharmic. They're not even necessarily interested, because the lower modes of material nature, namely passion and ignorance, and as Kali Yuga goes on, more so ignorance, because they are there, then even Artha, or economic development, people are not so much interested. They simply just want to have fun without having to work. Well, if I could just win the pools, or if I can just retire early. This is just the spirit to enjoy without performing any type of work. So this is not proper engagement, certainly not for devotees. And Krishna explains that one cannot maintain one's physical body even without work. So whatever the one does, then we have to have some engagement for the mind. And then because our mind and senses are attached to material sense objects, then this is recommended that we engage these. In previous verse, Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevanam, Bhakti-uchate. We engage the mind and the senses in Krishna's service. We engage the intelligence in Krishna's service, Buddhi Yoga. And when we engage all these faculties in the Lord's service, then they become purified. And in due course, then these senses become no more dangerous to us than a serpent with broken fangs. So if there was a snake, sometimes some of the most poisonous snakes are actually not very big. Like you get the green mamba, the black mamba. These are very poisonous snakes. And they're not so big. It's not like a big boa constrictor. But if it had no teeth and it had no poisonous bite, then it would be no threat to us whatsoever. If we knew that, then we wouldn't be like so afraid. So similarly, when these senses are engaged 10% in the Lord's service, we have to put in a lot of endeavor to giving our attention to this process or to the different aspects and processes of devotional service, beginning with Shravanam Kirtanam. We put a lot of effort into that, and then it will become natural, and then the natural flow will go towards Krishna. At the moment, our natural flow goes towards Maya, personally speaking. If you leave us alone too long, then we fall into Maya. That's the effect. And even for, Prabhupada mentions in the first canto, even the most stalwart victims can fall victim to Maya. So stalwart devotees can fall victim to Maya. What to speak of us mere fledglings or mortals? So here the different types of liberation are mentioned so that we can see that what's being offered is actually much greater than this. There was one time Bhaktivinoda Thakur seen one Mataji and she was crying, and he approached her and says, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Nobody wants to know me in Kali Yuga." And he says, "Well, why is that?" I can't remember the full thing, but she says something like, "All her sisters have left her, and I'm all alone." And he says, "What's your name?" And she says, "My name is Sayuja Mukti." So he ran away, chanting with his hands over his ears, "Keep away from me." But this is the platform of a pure devotee, is that the different types of liberation are ready to serve the pure devotee hand and foot. But they don't take that service because they don't want to invoke some or attract some kind of cheap following. So it's not to say that our own Srila Prabhupada or other spiritual masters may not be able to perform various mystic feats, etc. But they're not looking for cheap following who simply want to see some magic. And then that example is given. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that you can tell the potency of a pure devotee by how many people he converts to Vaishnavism. So if we look at Srila Prabhupada's potency, how many people he converted from such degraded upbringings to become aspiring pure devotees. He created a society of pure devotees. Prabhupada mentions that this ISKCON is a society of pure devotees. And we have the opportunity to try to join that society as well. And that society exists in the spiritual world. This is what Srila Prabhupada has given us. He's given us the society of the spiritual world. And by neglecting these other offerings of the material world, then our inheritance is that pure devotional service, eternal serving mode of pure devotional service. So there's more to be said on this, and there's more verses on this, so this can be continued for the next few weeks. So these instructions, if one is infected with the desire for material enjoyment, now that doesn't just mean to say contact of the senses with the sense objects, but the subtle sex life also is name, fame, adoration, and gain. These subtle things, because the subtle leads to the gross ultimately, or material liberation. Then, so this instruction that one cannot rise to a platform of pure loving service, if one is still infected by these things. So this is, even though superficially we render devotional service according to the routine regulative principles, and Prabhupada mentions that one may perform all 64 regulative principles. So at the moment we're thinking 4 regulative principles, but there's so many other regulative principles which you can read in the Nectar of Devotion, which we must avoid. Certain things we must avoid and certain things we must do in order to try to immunize ourselves from the effect of Maya, from the effect of Kali Yuga. But even if one follows all these things routinely, then if one still has a desire within their heart to enjoy separately from Krishna, if one still identifies with this material world and has affection for this material world, then the affection for Krishna is hampered. So this is being laid out before us so that we can see, oh yeah, I'm still affected by this, so therefore I must engage more Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana, single-pointed attention. Bhogeshwarya prasaktanam taya paratachetasam. So Bhoga and Aishwarya, if one is attracted by sense enjoyment and material opulence, then the resolute determination for devotional service doesn't take place. So therefore we have to keep on bringing the mind back daily, doing that, and gradually, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, we become closer and closer to Krishna, and we become stronger in devotional service. And in due course of time, then that inheritance of unalloyed pure devotional service will be ours also. We're following the footsteps, Mahajanayena Gatasapanta, of the great Mahajans, and by continuing to do that, then we are assured of the same destination as them. So we'll just stop there if anyone has any questions or comments. Yes, Raghunath?
Online from Adokshija Krishna Prabhu. So he says, so he's apologizing that he can't be here because he's still sick when he's watching the lecture. How do we avoid relegating the great opportunity we have to mundane activity? Or is it beyond our control if we have made offenses?
Well, certainly, thanks to Prabhu. Very nice question. I'll try and answer it. Certainly, if we made offences, then it's going to be very difficult because that blocks the path. So we have to act in such a way as to clear those offences. Otherwise, we may continue for a very long time. Unless we clear those offences, then the path still remains blocked. So it's just like, I remember, I won't mention any names, but one dignitary who I was quite friendly with told me a situation that someone, a young person within the, just trying to think how to say it without making it obvious who it could be, not a devotee, but someone within their organization spoke out against this person who was the leader of that organization. And because they were young and ambitious, they were thinking, okay, they're right, they'll just say the right thing, and then they'll block this person's plan. But what happened was that person found themselves getting moved to another place, and their opportunities for promotion, etc., were blocked, and the reputation went with them. So but only that person could remove that blockage if he wanted to. So it's described that if we commit some offences against a Vaishnava, which may block our ability to get access to the Lord's mercy, then we have to seek forgiveness. And these examples are, many examples are given in the Shastra. Ambarish Maharaj was purposefully criticized by Durvasa Muni. He put him in a situation where he was damned if he do, damned if he didn't. The story is basically that Durvasa Muni was, and his disciples were fasting, and they had arrived. They weren't fasting. They'd arrived at Maharaj Ambarish's place. Ambarish Maharaj was fasting, and he had to break the fast by a certain time, but he couldn't break the fast because he couldn't eat before his guests, which was Durvasa Muni and his followers. So he took advice from the Brahmins and says, well, if you take Charitamrita, that's simultaneously breaking the fast and not breaking the fast. But Durvasa Muni took offense at this. He decided to take offense. He should have known better. He should have seen that the devotional mood of Maharaj Ambarish, he was already in there. He was already perplexed. He didn't want to offend. So, and what happened was that Durvasa Muni got himself in trouble. He was chased throughout the universe by the Sudarshan Chakra, and even Lord Vishnu told him, I can't relieve you of your offense. You should go to the person whom you have offended and beg forgiveness. So he did, and he corrected his mentality. Now, simply paying lip service, and it's like I remember one devotee, he was instructed by a spiritual master to go and pay his obeisances to someone. So he did. He says, "Okay, did you do it?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Did you mean it?" He said, "No." So what's the value of it? Still maintain the same offensive mentality towards the person, but for simply going through the motions, So going through the motions is a start, because some people won't even do that. But if we have committed some offence, we have to try to clear that offence by changing our mentality. Otherwise, we'll go on and commit the same offence, and we'll commit the same offence again and again, either to the same person or another person. So, in the first part of the question again was, could you repeat that, Ragnar?
To mundane activity? Or is it beyond our control if we have made offenses?
So sometimes that would happen also, that if we make some offence, then we don't even value our own devotional service. We blame others that, I'm packing it in because of you. This is standard kind of thing. That we blame someone else, that's why we're giving up. But the only person who gives up, the only cause of giving up is ourselves. So to not see it as a mundane activity means we have to understand the purpose behind what we're doing. We're not simply just like yesterday, Jayananda and myself were discussing, there's some renovations going on in one of the houses. And I was asking him, do you enjoy this service? And he says, yeah. And he enjoys that service because he sees it connected with Krishna, not just because it's like knocking down things, fixing things, because he sees this is actually being done for the service of the deities. These houses belong to the deities, and we're fixing them so that either devotees can live in them and do service, or that some non-devotees can live there, pay rent, and through that rent we're maintaining the mission here in Scotland. So it's all connected. So we have to see how is it connected to Lord Chaitanya's mission, and try to develop that service attitude rather than simply trying to please ourselves. Then we try to please the Lord and the Lord's representative, and this is the true lasting happiness which we'll experience. If you're looking for a material happiness, then that is not guaranteed to last. And so many examples of that are there. Whereas the happiness which Srila Prabhupada, which the Guru Parampara has given us, is this Anandam Buddhivardhanam, ever increasing ocean of transcendental bliss. And so it may require some endeavor to get purified, especially if we're taking a bath and rolling in the mud, taking a bath, rolling in the mud, then it's a lot of effort until it finally comes to the point where we stop rolling in the mud. Or perhaps, different devotees, we all have different histories. So someone may be coming from a not so contaminated background, or they've made a lot of devotional service in the last life. We can't simply judge someone because they're in the movement 1 year or 10 years or 30 years. We don't know what their spiritual journey has been. So we don't see devotional service as mundane because it isn't. It's related to the Lord. And therefore, if our motivation is mundane, we want some mundane thing out of it, then we can see it as mundane. Sometimes devotional service is seen as an obstacle. Just like I know one devotee, he used to he chant his rounds, and as soon as he'd done, he'd say, "Oh, that's them out of the way now." And then when Sankirtan was done, that's that out of the way. So out of the way of what? Where are we heading? What is our goal? If our sadhana and our service are all in the way, then what is it they are in the way of? They're not in the way. They are the way to something. So if anyone's got anything else they'd like to share here in the Temple of Hoksha, if you want to share something, realizations on this.
Daksha Prabhu makes a comment. He says, Shivaram Swami advises we have to continue with hard taste and humbly wait to be reinstated in the Lord's good graces.
Tell me about it. Yeah, it's a fact. Sometimes your face might be tripping you, but what can you do? If you made a mess, you just have to humbly continue with your service, and that also is test of sincerity. And changing our attitude, becoming more favorable instead of being inimical. So yeah, thanks for that, Daksha. Nice comment from Shivaram Swami. Anything else anyone would like to share? Prasadam. Okay, it's going to in the key. So Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj ki, Chaitanya Charitamrita ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.
His Grace Prabhupada Prana Prabhu ki.